to chapter 19, which is our speed, agility, and quickness training concepts chapter. This is more or less the progression from the plyometrics base to now working with this a more explosive base, a more start-stop base, a more change of direction base. And it's just a natural progression for us to take us from plyometrics into this SAQ, which is what Nasm usually goes through and talks about. Okay, so let's go ahead, and it's a shorter chapter compared to some of the other ones that we initially talked with earlier on with like exercise science and everything like that. So let's progress right here through. All right, so with our SAQ training, obviously we're looking for ways that we can get the muscles, the neurological or nervous system, our ligaments, tendons, and other soft tissues like cartilage, and our cardiovascular system to kind of communicate really well together, stimulate it to a point that it's going to become very effective, and really create those adaptations that for those areas, the muscular and neurological, connective tissue, and cardiovascular, to be able to enhance an athlete, to enhance a senior, to enhance a general population person. So it trickles into everybody as long as we use it effectively. All right, so there's your definitions below there: speed, agility, and quickness. Speed, the ability to move the body in one intended direction as fast as possible. Agility, ability to start or accelerate, and then stop, decelerate, and or stabilize, and then change directions to a signal, a stimulus, is something that will make you basically have to adjust. And then also at that same time, you're trying to maintain postural alignment or postural control. And then quickness, react and change body positions with maximal rate of force production. So basically, that maximal rate of force production, we could even chalk that up to with max power, all right, in all planes of motion, from all body positions. So that could even be getting up off the floor and then starting your run. That's just a simplistic way of doing it. I mean, and if you look at the senior population, can they get up off the floor fairly quick if it were an emergency situation? That's where we could work with quickness with them, is trying to make them understand that. All right. So speed, agility, and quickness, those are your definitions. Pay attention to those. Definitely something that will be test related. All right, so again, one direction as fast as possible. With speed, all right, if you notice here, this person obviously is running. So with running, there's two different ways that we can work around running, and one of those is stride rate, the amount of times that the foot makes contact with the ground. So the higher the stride rate, the higher the speed technically, and the stride frequency. All right, so those two are stride rate, the amount of time; stride frequency, how often it happens and how often it occurs. So if you have a longer stride, your frequency will be down, all right, because you're not going to touch as much, so that's just kind of how we can put those into perspective so that we can be able to adjust our people. All right, now everybody has a different body segment. Everybody has different femur, different lower leg, so tib, fib lengths. Everybody has different torso lengths. So a lot of these will be dependent upon, basically that person. So if I'm 5'10" and you're 6'3", the stride rate is going to be less, even though you may touch the same, because my rate is going to be farther. All right, my stride frequency may be the same, but see how we can always implement and change that. So it just depends on the person and what they're physiologically made up of, and anatomically made up of. All right. So when we talk about speed, we want to talk about proper mechanics. So we have front side and back side mechanics. With front side mechanics, we're talking about what we call triple flexion, which is hip, knee, and ankle flexion. Now, ankle flexion is what we would consider dorsiflexion. Okay. Backside mechanics is triple extension, which is hip, knee, and ankle extension. But with ankles, that would be ankle plantar flexion. All right. So with triple flexion, with front side mechanics, what we're looking to improve there is our ability to decelerate by, increasing our braking force. But at the same time, we also can use that really aggressive flexion to be able to use as a driving force for propulsion. Okay. Whereas backside mechanics, definitely more about that push phase off the ground, so ground reactive force. All right. And so at that point there, we are working more, at that same time with that backside mechanics of the foot and upper body, where we have that arm drive to help us, again, to be able to get massive explosion so that we can then propel ourselves in the direction that's intended. Okay. So with these checkpoints during running, we want to obviously look really carefully at the foot and ankle complex. We want to look at really closely the knee complex. Surprisingly enough, you may see, and it says it right there on the top, if we look right down here at the knee valgus location, all right, you might get people that if you pay attention closely and stand behind them while they're running, you can see that bow in or that knock knee of that complex. Now, there are a lot of other aspects that we talked about previously in terms of checkpoints, collapsing arches, and that can create that valgus. So that would be where the foot and ankle complex come in. So if we have even just a slight amount of foot external rotation, that can change the way that our foot makes contact with the ground, therefore creating more stress, therefore creating a potential for injury. So we have to make sure we're watching both front and backside mechanics for that. That's our checkpoint base. And then where are we in terms of our LPHC, our lumbopelvic hip complex? Like it says here, do we have an upright torso, or are we leaning forward? When you're accelerating, the body wants to be angled down, not aggressively like you're doing a good morning, but you want to be lean forward. Why? We want that center of gravity in front of the base of support. So therefore, what would end up happening is while you're running, right, your belly button would be in front of your hips. So what we're doing is we're trying to catch ourselves over that base of support, but what that's doing is speeding us up. Think about when you are going downstairs, right? When you go downstairs, you're more upright and you're trying to maintain consistent steps down. The minute that your belly button goes in front of your hips, you start speeding up and you almost want to trip going down the stairs. It's the same thing for sprinting, right? But we're doing it on purpose until we get to a certain point of our run that we feel like we need to start getting ourselves to stand upright. And then at that point, during max velocity, we want to make sure that we're pretty much straight up and down. All right. There shouldn't be any rounding of the back. There shouldn't be any undue lean forward. All right. Now, like they say here in this comments, unless you're reaching for an object like a baton or trying to reach your body in front of itself to be able to cross the finish line, whatever that may be. All right. But normally it's a lean into that acceleration. And then as you start getting up to closer to max velocity, you'll start seeing yourself lift up more. Now the head, obviously want the head to be in line with our hips and our pelvis and our lumbar spine. That will help. So like a neutral, we want to consider that neutral spine. All right. So there shouldn't be any unjust or, unknowing compensations that are there. All right, we don't really want to have the head kicked back. We don't want to have the head kicked forward, okay? Now, again, unless you're doing it for a purpose, like it says here, like if you're trying to track a ball or another object, all right, that might be another reason for that, okay? The other thing, too, like it says on the very, very bottom, by tracking, it says, as this can affect the position of the lumbopelvic hip complex known as the pelvo-ocular reflex, ocular meaning vision. So therefore we're talking about how we can keep ourselves focused while keeping alignment while also maintaining focus on everything. So agility and quickness, all right, agility, high levels of coordination, being able to try to reset the body back over the center of gravity, because we know that at times we're going to be in front of the center of gravity. We're going to be on the side of outside of the base of support. Okay, meaning outside of those legs. And that's how we can change directions while also maintaining, increasing or decreasing speed depending upon what we're doing. So what do we need to think about? We need to be able to think about increasing the ability to decelerate better. We need to be able to understand that we can also help with what we call dynamic flexibility. So with movement, we have better postural control, we have better core strength, and we have better proprioception, or basically understanding where you are in relationship to space. Okay? So by having better agility, increased effective agility, we can actually think about reducing injury risks because we're using all planes of motion, sagittal, frontal, transverse planes of motion, and we're creating more force production at those soft tissue areas or connective tissues. So therefore we're enhancing those areas as well, making us a more well-rounded person. Hence the reason why agility is important for somebody like an elderly person, because it can help with fall prevention. Obviously, we modify that to an extent to make sure that they're getting exactly what they need. Okay? Then quickness. So here, quickness, just being able to react to visual cues, auditory cues, kinesthetic stimuli. So that's some sort of touch, okay, that you will be able to then react as quickly as possible and as fast as possible so that you can make the necessary changes or responses that are needed. So for the non-athletic population, we've kind of talked about both of these, but again, softball, golf, tennis, hiking, running, skiing, water sports. Anybody ever try getting on water skis or the boards, the water boards? Even not even on a boat, not even like being pulled by a boat, but then think about paddle boarding, think about surfing. All of those require all of what we've been working on so far. We need to think about coordination, power, reaction time, agility, all right? All of those things matter when we're trying to do those recreational activities. So if we want to get better at something, we have to be able to increase our general functioning patterns. So whether it be flexibility, whether it be balance and coordination, speed, agility, and quickness here, all of those are necessary, okay? But we have to get people to understand how to accelerate, how to decelerate, and how to change directions. So that's when we talk about the modifications. If you're going to plan specific workouts, we need to make sure we have that modification for the newer person so that they can experience those transition points and then be able to eventually pick up that speed, agility, and quickness at a better rate. Okay? So how do we know where they're at? Assessment, right? If we know where they're at with assessment, we can get a good profile on them, whether it be an injury profile, general health profile, and then obviously assessments that we can do for the dynamic portion of everything to see where they are in terms of their base of their initial baseline of health, wellness, fitness, and exercise. Okay? But they need to make sure they, before, just like plyometrics, they need to come in with a good level of flexibility. They have to be able to repeat, so muscular endurance. They need to be endured, cardiovascular endurance, and then they have to have some strength to them before we can really ramp up what we want to do with them, okay? But just like anything else, slow and simple, and progress that eventually down the line to fast and complex. That will only help them to build into the program that you're trying to give them. So starting off slow and simple, that basically goes into that whole continuum that we talk about, known to unknown, right? Make sure they know the movements to things that they're eventually not going to know, but they understand how to move their body correctly. All right. So with youth, all right, basic movement will make it so that they can do increases in rate and magnitude, okay? But again, they need to be developing these good movement patterns before we can really see how to progress them in terms of speed, agility, and quickness. Even if we look at just simple physical education classes, those individuals who have a hard time just doing simple locomotor skills like running or walking or jogging, and then moving them into galloping and skipping. If they can't decipher how to move their body in those ways, it's going to be very hard for us to progress them in a speed, agility, quickness routine because of the fact that their body just doesn't move well in very simplistic movement patterns, and adults the same way. All right. But what we want to make sure of is that we want to make sure we have an environment that's meant to be challenging for kids. All right. So they have to be able to adapt. And then at that point, they have to be able to apply, appropriate movement patterns to those measures of an external force or an external stimulus. Okay. So we have to be able to understand that they have the basics down. Okay. Well, now let's progress them. Let's make things a little bit more challenging on them. But again, progressing them in the proper way will only allow them to improve at a better rate. So what do we want to do? Give them a bunch of different exposure patterns. We want to challenge their neuromuscular system, meaning coordination, more so the coordination between the nervous system and the muscular system. We want to challenge their biomechanical demands so that their ability just increases naturally. All right. So if we're going to start progressing this for youth, we can look at the bottom table and understand that we want to get them to be 1 day initially and then build up to 3 days initially. The beginning might be 4 different drills and eventually progress to 8 different drills. 1 set, move to 4, 3 to 5 repetitions in that range, and give them initially a little bit longer rest period, but eventually we want them to be able to repeat bouts, on a fairly consistent basis very quickly because it's such a short duration. Okay, so here's a couple of different examples for youth drills. One called follow the snake, and then the other one being red light, green light. And like it says here, follow the snake. The instructor lays 5 to 10 jump ropes on the ground in an S pattern. Participants line up on one side of the rope, keeping a foot on each side of the rope. They follow the pattern of the rope first forward and then backward. And then what you do is you time them. Okay, pretty straightforward. And then red light, green light, we know about that. Red light and green light, call green light, people move. Call red light, you must stop. Well, with that, red light, what are you working on? You're working on proper balance, proper coordination, proper deceleration. Then green light works on, okay, let's re-accelerate again, or just accelerate again, and then and then react again to that stimulus. Okay, so it's a speed factor and it's a quickness factor. Now, there's not a lot of there can be some agility built in there if you're putting in obstacles and making them maneuver around those obstacles and then calling it red light, green light, but that's a little bit different. And that might be something that you eventually progress to make it harder. But these are drills that we've been doing for a long time that it's fun, it's entertaining, but it's also appropriate for a young child who hasn't had a lot of exposure. All right. Now with weight loss, we can use an interval base. Now we've talked about high intensity intervals before, but high intensity short duration programs, we can work with this. Why? Because we want to get a quick bout of exercise, but also get the most out of it. So it's more efficient in terms of I'm getting less time under tension, but ultimately that time under tension is highly intense, so it's going to trade off. Okay. So what do we want to do? We want to introduce things gradually so that we can eventually, not cause really high levels of wear on the body. We don't want to have high levels of impact right off the bat. We want to keep it a little bit lower until they get more built into it. We want to try to avoid having excessive levels of soreness. We want to have lower levels of joint stress. All of these things matter because we will build into it. But with people with weight loss, what is that saying? Let's not, we can't sugarcoat what we're trying to say here. If you're trying to lose weight, that means that you might be overweight or obese. So we also know as professionals that if that is the case and they're overweight or obese, we know that's more strain on the body anyway. So therefore, we have to be very cautious, more cautious than a normal population. I wouldn't say more, but still want to be aggressively cautious on all populations, but really so with overweight populations because of the fact that they have more body weight, and so therefore they're putting more strain on muscles. The nervous system has to work differently. The joint structures have to work differently. Are we seeing compensations? All of those things need to be really apparent for you to really say, okay, I need to make sure that we back this down a little bit, or no, they're getting better and we can ramp it up a little bit, but by a little bit, so we don't cause that undue stress. But again, technique outweighs intensity at the beginning, and then eventually we build in. So, they give you a circuit here, an example circuit. I'll let you go ahead and read through that, but we're talking more about shuffles, okay? But this is for the weight loss population, so it's very, very appropriate. But it's meant to be, fast. It's meant to be changing directions, all right? And then also be able to maintain intensity throughout. But I can let you go ahead and read that, so you can always pause this and go through like an example of that. Another example here, a 5-10-5 drill, all right, working on changing directions, speeding up, slowing down, all right, all of that comes into play here. Also, there's another one called a partner mirror drill where you're doing exactly that. You're mirroring what's going on, all right, so you can pause, take a look at that, look at your rest periods, look at the drills that you're doing, okay? Older adults, again, trying to maintain, see, this is where it comes to become a little bit more critical. SAQ is ground reactive force. SAQ is weight-bearing activity because you're using your body and propelling it. That means that it's helping to increase or maintain bone density so that we can have proper bone turnover without just losing it, okay? Also with that, coordination and muscular power in seniors will only help them to avoid injury, reduce risks of falls, and basically give them more confidence that if they had to even reach up to a higher cabinet level on a tiptoe, they're not going to feel uncomfortable. All right. So with the training, we really just want to think about, okay, safety is the bottom line. Okay. Safety is the bottom line, and the drills that we do are going to mimic real life actions. So it'll mimic activities of daily living, but at a different extent, so that it's a little bit more intensive, but not to the point that they can't do it. Okay, so older adults, still very appropriate, need to do it because they need that challenge on their body to keep them moving. They need to be able to maintain their independence. All right. Again, here's some circuits for them. A stand-up figure 8. There's your cone hurdle step overs. So we can get them to be moving. Now, how fast they move is how able-bodied they are, how they're able to move just in general. So if they're a slow mover, well, we expect those cone hurdle step overs to be a little bit slower, okay? On the command for the figure 8, they want to stand up from their chair and continue to move. Well, if they're a slow stander, well, we know how fast. So we have to do it to their pace, but eventually progress them to the point that it becomes easier and they can move a little bit more effectively and efficiently. So here's your programming strategies. These are what we can build directly into our template, right? Because don't forget, we're talking about flexibility in terms of the upper portion of our OPT model programming template. You have your flexibility, your cardio, you have your balance, right? You have your reactives, you have your SAQs, and then we get into our resistance model. So this is the last one before the resistance training. Now here, I forgot, inside of balance core and then into your plyo. Okay, and that's really going to be appropriate for us so that we can, really go through each one. But here, to kind of go through the programming strategies, where are they? Where do they fall? And follow right along with these designs. Now, this is for a healthy adult, all right? We don't want to program these aspects for a senior, and we don't want to do it for a youth because youth are not little adults. We talked about that before. So maintaining that optimal level. Now, again, here these are ladder drills, all right? These are ladder drills, so you can go ahead and pause these, look at them, see how they work with the feet patterns, see where they go and how it works, okay? There's the 5-10-5. There's your modified box drill. So you're basically going to be going from cone to cone as quickly as possible, but you always got to go back to the starting cone. There's your T drill, all right? And there's your proper layout. So again, pause these, look at them, All right, these are really appropriate for you to understand and how they work. Also, you'll inside of the training manual, the book, you'll see how the proper execution of them is. All right, modified box drill, there's your box drill, there's your left drill, all right, and how we go back and forth between cones, okay? And those are just some examples. Now, you can be more creative and make it into a different manner. You can look more information up on SAQ workouts, because especially strength coaches and performance enhancement specialists, sport performance coaches, all of them work a lot with SAQ, obviously for the athletic population. So they are really good at cone drills. They're really good at change of direction drills. And some of those might carry over to even the elderly population, so we never know. Okay? So take a look at these reference materials. Take a look at them a little bit closer inside of your CPT manual, and then you can go from there. All right. But again, this is more about the SAQ component, and we're really trying to consider how we can implement these almost athletic-based movements into all populations, and not solely with athletes, because we want to enhance everybody, but with the right intensity, with the right modifications, and the right strategies, so that we can tailor it and make everybody more just better movers, but also be able to have more confidence in their movement. All right. Thanks for listening, and you'll hear from us soon. Take care.